Hey everybody, welcome to the Bernina L460 Serger Manual. In this episode, I'm going to give you a fun fact about the spool stabilizers for cone thread. These are the spool stabilizers. That's going to be on page 11 if you're following along. And then also, I'm going to go over another topic that I couldn't easily find in the manual, but one of the things about using your serger is if you break a thread and you have to re-thread for some reason, you also need to clear your threads from underneath all of the metal parts underneath before you can start stitching again, because if you don't, chances are your thread is going to get jammed and your stitch isn't going to come out perfect. So I'm going to show you what that's all about in a minute. But first, let me talk about these spool stabilizer cones. This is a interesting little thing because I didn't even know this until I read the manual. They're shaped like this, and you can see they're shaped so you put them on the spool pin and then you put the cones on top. Okay, and the purpose of those are to keep the spools from jiggling around on your spool stand when you're serging, because the serger can stitch really fast and it vibrates. So keeping your spools nice and secure on the back of your spool stand is important. So what I want to show you here is, I'm going to show you the inside of these two spools. You can see that this spool, this cone, has a smaller opening than this one. So for the smaller ones, you're going to put the spool stabilizer in with the small side face up, okay? And that's going to fit securely in there and secure your spool. Now on a cone thread that has a wider base like this, if I stick it in like this, look at how far it has to slide before it sticks in there. And quite honestly, it's not going to hold the thread because the spool stand is at the base of the spool. So the way you want to deal with, oops. All right, so the way you want to insert your spool stabilizer for these kind are to put the fat end in first, and then that's going to help secure the spool with a wider opening. Okay, so that's just a fun little fact and a way to help keep your spools from jiggling around when you're serging. So that was my first thing for today. The second thing is I'm going to bring my serger over and I want to show you up close and personal what the threads look like when you stop mid-stitch. All right, so I'm going to take the presser foot off. I had been working with this serger and I was using a 4-thread stitch. And what I want to show you here is if I try to pull my thread out, my tail, you can see that some of the threads are actually trapped underneath and underneath the needle plate, and they're wrapped around the stitch finger, and then also they're wrapped around the looper. So when I try to pull this out, you can see it's a tangled mess. I'm going to turn my hand wheel so I can get them untangled as much as I can from the top. And if you count the threads here, there should only be 4 threads. So I can count at least 6 threads. So I'm going to trim my tail here, and I'm just going to pull at my threads until I end up with just 4. Okay, so now I've got the 4 threads that I should have, and in doing that, I also they also became untangled from underneath. All right, so now they're clear and free from being tangled or wrapped around the looper underneath plate, and you can start serging again. This is it seems like a really simple thing, but I know myself when I'm in a hurry and I broke a thread and I leave everything as it is and I just rethread that one thread that broke and I start to stitch again, sometimes the thread breaks again or the stitch doesn't form properly because all that extra thread that was wrapped around the loopers under the needle plate can cause havoc to your stitch. So that's the easy way to clear your threads. First, untangle them from the top, cut them short, and then tease out the extra threads that you didn't need. Okay. And then you can put your presser foot on and then start stitching again. So I'll just put my presser foot back on. Okay. All right, and then to start stitching again, I'm just going to bring my threads over to the back left corner, let's say, and I'm good to go. And just so my serger doesn't feel like I'm ignoring it, I'm going to go ahead and serge a seam just to check to make sure everything is fine and fabulous. Okay, so you can see that I'm stitching fine and everything is ready to go again. All right, so I know that was just kind of a quick little topic, but little things like that are important when you're working on your serger. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got loopers swinging back and forth, and you've got needles going up and down, so you really need to make sure your threads are securely placed on the back of your thread stand, that they're threaded properly through all of the thread guides. And if you have to stop and rethread, make sure you clear your threads before you start serging again so you can start off and not get jammed. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this quick little episode of the Bernina L460 Serger Manual. I'm starting to come to the end of the list of things I have planned to talk about in this series. So if you have specific questions about working with this serger, please post them below and I'll add them to my list so I make sure I answer those questions before this serger has to fly back home to its owner, my friend Eric, who let me borrow it. So that's my report for today. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next Sunday for another episode of the Bernina L460 Serger Manual.